I want you to imagine a world where you could control any computer, any television, any appliance, or any phone with just your mind. Is this world you think about far in the future? Does it feature aliens, and does it seem like we'll never get there? Because what if I told you that your imagined world is actually today's reality? And while the 21st century is known for its various types of technology that were intuitive and changed our world, I think that BCIs, standing for brain-computer interfaces, are definitely one of our hallmarks. Brain-computer interfaces are a novel technology integrating neurology with artificial intelligence and assistive care. But before I talk too much about brain-computer interfaces, I'll answer two very pressing questions. What are they, and how do they work? It all starts in the nervous system, which is essentially the grand central station of your body. Now, the anatomy of the nervous system is split into two main parts. Firstly, the central nervous system, which includes the brain and the spinal cord, and also the peripheral nervous system, including all the peripheral nerves that run throughout your body. What these nerves and the brain and the spinal cord all do is they take in sensory information from your surroundings, including how things feel, your temperature, and things of that sort. It then integrates these into your thoughts, where you make decisions based on your sensory information. And finally, motor signals, including the movements of your body, like moving your arm or clicking on this YouTube video, or smaller things like secreting hormones from your pituitary gland. And after gaining a thorough understanding of the central nervous system, we can now use technology such as electroencephalography to help us understand exactly what we're looking at. Now, in case you weren't aware, electroencephalograms are devices that track the electrical signaling that goes around in your brain. And this electrical signaling, depending on where it is in the brain, will indicate a certain type of thought or a will that you have. This information that the EEG tracks is sent to a monitor that essentially shows what you're thinking in the forms of various waves of electrical activity. This is the integral step 1 of a 3-step process that all brain-computer interfaces use, where step 1 is taking in a signal from your brain, step 2 is using a computer to understand what exactly it is you're thinking, and taking that electrical signal and making it into something qualitative. And finally, a device output, meaning what the brain-computer interface actually does. And the bottom line here is that brain-computer interfaces essentially act on behalf of your body. And for people whose central nervous system works just fine, where they can think and their cognition is fine, but for some reason they're paralyzed, they might not be able to actually act upon what the brain desires. And in suit, a lot of the applications for brain-computer interfaces are based in assistive technology. Firstly, there are prosthetics, and these are different from regular prosthetics because it's not your muscles at all controlling these bionic arms, but rather a computer that's taking in your neurological signals. And as I said earlier, this is important when you are paralyzed and can't move these muscles at all. Secondly, a lot of stroke patients have to go through rehabilitation to try and regain some of the motor control that they lost. And this is important to do with a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And neurofeedback machines, which are another form of brain-computer interfaces, allow stroke patients to regain what they otherwise lost. And lastly, one of the most simple but integral parts of brain-computer interfaces is their communication interfaces. And this allows people who can't move their mouths to speak but have a lot to say in their brain speak through a computer. And upon reading about these different applications of brain-computer interfaces, I could only think of one question. And it was, if BCI for assistive technology was limitless? Now, it sounds a bit of a grandiose question, but the answer is essentially no, it isn't. Brain-computer interfaces are impacted uniquely by a variety of ethical concerns, including identity, consent, and security. And all of these impact the way that brain-computer interfaces can and will develop in the future. Identity is one of the most unique concerns, dealing directly with the psychological impact that brain-computer interfaces can have on a patient. And this is seen in kind of a cause and effect way. Firstly, applying a brain-computer interface means constantly having a very conspicuous apparatus on your head. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing. And because of this, a lot of people who have adopted brain-computer interfaces, or a main inhibitor for doing so, is the fact that they'll have an inhuman self-image. They'll see themselves as somewhat of a cyborg rather than a complete human. For brain-computer interfaces, consent is a quite tricky topic, and this is because a lot of people who use these devices aren't very independent. Their families take charge of a lot of their home life because they physically cannot take care of themselves. That means that legally, families decide whether or not the training for brain-computer interfaces is worth it. However, a lot of the times family underestimates the burden of training, the emotional toll that brain-computer interfaces have, and unknowingly put their family members through a lot of the suffering that they simply don't want to go through. Additionally, the person who's undergoing the training can't actually communicate. That means that without a brain-computer interface, the people who are using it can't consent, which is inherently flawed and not exactly something that can be fixed, but rather a deterrent from an actual consent process from occurring. When information from your brain is being uploaded to an external computer, it has some inherent security concerns, especially when other people, perhaps across the world, can hack into what you're thinking. And while that is kind of a far-fetched concern and usually is fixed with encryption, there is another very real security threat with brain-computer interfaces. When the brain-computer interface acts on behalf of you, it becomes part of your legal entity. That means the actions that you take, or the brain-computer interface takes, perhaps because of a malfunction, are still on you. That means if your brain-computer interface, for whatever reason, decides to crash into a car, that is on you. A lot of the legal concerns with brain-computer interfaces have to do with understanding whether a person caused an action or the device caused an action. And with an understanding of these ethical concerns, we can ask ourselves, what's next? Where will brain-computer interfaces go in the near future? And the answer to this question is quite simple: optimization. An optimized brain-computer interface will be faster, meaning less risks, less malfunctions, and a more inconspicuous and user-friendly design. With optimization becomes revolution, opening new doors to new jobs, new technologies that'll form parallel to brain-computer interfaces. And with brain-computer interfaces comes recognition of the people who otherwise cannot speak in our society, cannot fend for themselves, but now will have the legs and the arms to do so. And of course, brain-computer interfaces open the doors for new definitions of inclusion, because inclusive technology means an inclusive future that's integral to everyone, because regardless of whether we use brain-computer interfaces, we need a future where everyone can participate, which, on the bottom line, is why I chose to research brain-computer interfaces for this project. The impact, the revolution, the recognition, and the inclusion it gives are beyond comparison. With that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. And if you're looking for my sources, they're on the Google Doc.